It's now time for our special guest. We're delighted to welcome back Dr. Steve Blake. Dr. Steve Blake, SCD, has earned a doctorate in holistic health, specializing in nutritional biochemistry, and a doctorate in naturopathic medicine. He offers classes at the University of Hawaii and has taught classes at Stanford University, McLean Hospital, and at Boston University Medical Center. Dr. Blake wrote the 2008 McGraw-Hill College textbook, Vitamins and Minerals Demystified, and has just authored a nutritional approach to Alzheimer's disease. He wrote Understanding Dietary Fats and Oils, Healing Medicine, and co-authored Mosby's 2001 Nursing Drug Reference. He is the author of the Herb Doctors with worldwide information, as well as of the Diet Doctor software for graphing dietary nutrients, and was director of the Maui Holistic Health Center for 7 years. He and his wife, Catherine, help to run, in fact, they do run, our BSH Maui group, and they live on an organic farm on Maui that is solar powered. His presentation tonight is entitled Arthritis, a Natural Approach. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Steve Blake.
Well, thanks for coming tonight. It looks like quite a full house. And tonight's talk is about a painful, disabling condition that's all too common in America. When I first looked into it, I wasn't sure that I would be able to find a nutritional approach to arthritis, but as I looked at the research, I find that there are some ways that we can help. Did you know that half the people over 65 have some sort of inflammatory joint condition? That's quite a lot. 70 million Americans now have an inflammatory joint condition like arthritis. And tonight's talk will be about osteoarthritis, which makes up about 90% of the arthritis cases. There's also rheumatoid arthritis, which is another painful and terrible disease, an autoimmune disease. Much of what I talk about tonight will have some relevance to rheumatoid arthritis as well. And that's because inflammation is one of the keys to both of these problems. If you can lower the inflammation in your body, then you're likely to be feeling better with either arthritis or rheumatoid arthritis. Chronic pain is one of the problems with arthritis, of course, and inflammation, which leads to joint damage. Over time, the joints tend to deteriorate a little bit. Now, before I get into the talk, I want to give you a little introduction of what I'll be talking about tonight. If you happen to have knee or hip arthritis, it would be great if you weighed a little bit less, and that would reduce the pressure on your knees and hips. So losing weight and wearing soft insoles are two good tips for knee and hip arthritis, which are all too common. Moderate activity helps with arthritis. So if you can do non-traumatic activity, that seems to help keep the joints going. It gets circulation to the joints and gets nutrients to the joints. And cartilage has no circulation system of its own, so we really need to have some sort of movement to keep that going. The hard part is, of course, if your joints hurt, you don't want to move. And if you do move, then your joints feel better. So that's a little catch-22 there. I'm going to talk about omega-3s and omega-6s tonight. I wrote a book on fats and oils, and it's quite striking that the omega-3s tend to reduce inflammation in our bodies, and the omega-6s tend to increase inflammation in our bodies. So I'll talk about which foods have which and why they do that. That'll be the complicated part of the talk. Antioxidants are something that quench free radicals, and fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds have lots of antioxidants. If you take in more antioxidants, then you're likely to have less damage to your joints. The damage to the joints, like so much damage to our bodies and aging itself, is mediated largely by free radical damage. So if you're taking these lovely antioxidants in, then you'll have less damage to your joints. There's something called advanced glycation end products. How many here have heard of advanced glycation end products? Good, just a few of you. So I'll have something new to tell you about. The abbreviation is AGE, or AGE, and they have a lot to do with aging in general, and they have something to do with joint damage too. Soy foods, we've heard a lot about soy foods lately. One thing is about soy foods is that they have a type of fat called phosphatidylcholine, a phospholipid. And this is one of the main parts of our synovial fluid, the lubricating fluid of our joints. And phosphatidylethanolamine is another of the phospholipids that's found in the synovial fluid. So supplying this raw material for the grease of the joints is a good idea. Now, cartilage itself is built on collagen. Collagen is the most common protein in the human body. And collagen makes up the structure of skin and teeth and bones, and also cartilage. So in order to keep our cartilage from disintegrating, it would be a great idea if we could keep our collagen regenerating. So we're going to need 4 specific nutrients for that, and I'll let you know what those are as we go on. Well, it says it on the screen: vitamin C, iron, copper, and manganese. There's something in our body that we make from homocysteine called S-adenosylmethionine, or more shortly SAMe. If we can be sure and make that, then it seems to quench pain very powerfully. Now, that can also be taken as a supplement, but the advantage of making it internally is that we're then taking an undesirable blood chemical called homocysteine, a risk factor for heart disease and Alzheimer's disease, and we're turning that into something good called SAMe, which will then help keep your joints pain-free and reduce inflammation. So I'll talk about that. And then I will mention a couple of medical plants and a couple of supplements. One that I think is a very bad idea that's very popular, and several that might be a good idea, and I'll show you scientific studies from peer-reviewed research so that you can make up your mind if you think these might be valuable or not. Here's some pictures of cartilage, and the bottom picture is kind of scary because the cartilage has all been worn away. This is the advanced stage of osteoarthritis, and in this case it would be very difficult to regrow cartilage because it's basically gone. So hopefully for all of us who don't yet have arthritis, we can nourish ourselves to try and help reduce our risk, and for those of us who have mild or beginning stages of arthritis, we can hopefully keep it from progressing to that point. To support the collagen and the proteoglycan synthesis. Now, proteoglycan's a big word, but many of you have heard of chondroitin sulfate. How many have heard of chondroitin sulfate? Yes, it's very commonly used for arthritis. Chondroitin sulfate also can be made in the body, and you'll never guess what helps us make chondroitin sulfate more than anything else. Well, that would be SAMe, that S-adenosylmethionine. Very helpful to assist us in creating these proteoglycans like chondroitin sulfate that make our cartilage springy and tough instead of being brittle. And if we have springy, tough cartilage, then it will tend to wear away less, and that's going to be a big help with reducing the effects of arthritis. The couple of things that we can't control are our age, and as you get older, osteoarthritis gets a bit more likely, and previous injury. Some people have had injuries to them. I notice in the research, people who work on floors and kneel a lot, they get injuries to their knees, and so they have more tendency to get arthritis. But we can control our weight. Well, or can we? I know it's very difficult, but there are ways to do it if we have the resolve to reduce our weight. For knee and hip joints, that's crucial. We can adjust our activity levels so we're getting lots of activity but no damaging activity. Running on concrete would be an example of a damaging activity that would be contraindicated for someone with knee or hip arthritis. On the other hand, running might be a great thing for someone with hand arthritis because you get so much circulation doing that. Nutritional adequacy, just get the RDA of a few simple nutritional vitamins and minerals, and that can help tremendously. And then there's those fatty acid imbalances that I mentioned. Here's a weight loss diet. Now, there are many weight loss diets out there, like the paleo diet or the South Beach diet. I'm sure you've all heard of many weight loss diets. This one's a little different because it's a healthy weight loss diet. People seem to forget that while you're losing weight, it might be a good idea if you didn't get some other terrible problem. For instance, my analysis of the paleo diet shows that the calcium balance is very low or even negative on the paleo diet. So yes, you may lose weight, but on the other hand, there may be problems. So this is just a very simple weight loss diet. It happens to be plant-based because that's the most nutritious type of diet. 1/4 fresh fruit. You can see on the top left of your screen a beautiful tray of fruit. If that was your breakfast, would you consider that you were suffering? Looks good to me. And then for lunch, it might be the right side of the screen, that beautiful salad with a little bit of satisfying avocado on it, maybe some creamy walnut dressing or something to really hit it off, preferably made without refined oils, but made from the walnuts themselves. 1/2 of your diet could be fresh vegetables, and they are so loaded with nutrients, vitamins and minerals, phytonutrients, antioxidants, that would be very good for your health if you could eat that many vegetables. Beans once or twice a day. Beans have a wonderful nutrition, and beans also have this phytosterols. Whole grains, if they're really whole, like brown rice or oatmeal, would be helpful if you have a calorie deficit after eating all the other things. I work on an organic farm, as Lorraine so kindly mentioned, and sometimes I need extra calories after I eat all the other things, so I include a little bit of grains for that purpose. And then 1 ounce or 2 of nuts or seeds are vital. Did you know only 8% of Americans get the very minimal amount of vitamin E that we need? And we very much do need it. So a handful of nuts or seeds, especially almonds or walnuts, hazelnuts, are rich in vitamin E, would be an excellent way. And you'll feel like moving on this diet. You'll feel lighter than if you ate heavier foods too. So that's my weight loss diet. I think we could all benefit by eating more like that, staying away from the processed foods that are so tempting. I'm going to talk for just a few minutes about the medical approach. Exercise and physical therapy are often recommended by doctors, and I think they're usually very helpful. If the exercise is non-traumatic, swimming or bouncing on a trampoline or some way that you're not impacting your joints. And physical therapy can be tremendously helpful if the physical therapist is knowledgeable and gentle. And then, of course, there's drugs. Medical doctors tend to give people drugs with osteoarthritis because it's painful. And certainly, if you have painful joints, you're going to be taking painkillers, without a doubt. The goal of a natural approach to osteoarthritis would be that you would want to take less pain pills because you hurt less. So hopefully that's what I would like to do for all of you tonight, is give you some ideas on how your joints can hurt so little that you don't need any pain pills at all, and that would then be really a success. The side effects can be a bit of a problem with these pills. I'll mention some of them. And also, the joints can continue to degenerate while the pain is hidden from you by the drug. So it's not a complete solution always. Surgery, of course, is an option. Most people try to avoid it, and hopefully some of my ideas will help you at least extend the time before you need surgery. Now, this is a little diagram from my Fats and Oils book on how these things work. And you see the joint with the red inflammation. I photoshopped the red out on the other one to show you that that one is cooler and less inflamed. If you have this substance called arachidonic acid, you have these enzymes that create inflammation. And they're called LOX enzymes, or lipoxygenase enzymes. Lipo for fat, and oxygenase because it's processed with oxygen. This process of arachidonic acid being processed by lipoxygenase enzymes creates what are known as leukotrienes. And these are a class of eicosanoids that create inflammation. They're one of the main causes of inflammation in our body, and they're a reaction of our body, usually to some sort of injury. For instance, in your joints, you may have pain, and this could trigger more inflammation with these leukotrienes. Now, if you're taking Advil or Celebrex, then this is going to interrupt this LOX enzyme, and it's going to create less pain and inflammation because there are less leukotrienes being created. Also, it interrupts the COX enzymes, the cyclooxygenase enzymes, so you'll be creating less of the prostaglandins that create pain and heat. Arachidonic acid is an omega-6. It's a 20-carbon omega-6 with 4 double bonds, 4 points of unsaturation. Now, you can make arachidonic acid in your bodies, and we all do, and it's quite easy for our bodies to make in a 3-step enzymatic process. We can make it from omega-6 oils that are plant-based, called linoleic acid. Linoleic acid is an omega-6, and it starts out with 2 double bonds, and during the course of the enzymes, it gets up to 4 double bonds and gets a couple carbons longer and becomes arachidonic acid. Now, arachidonic acid can also be taken directly into the diet. The reason this is important is that if you take into your diet preformed arachidonic acid, it's much more powerful. Your body doesn't have to create it. There it is, ready to be made into inflammatory leukotrienes and inflammatory prostaglandins. So where does it come from? Well, I have a dietary analysis program called the Diet Doctor, and I had to add arachidonic acid into it because the research just wasn't clear on which animal products had it and which didn't. But when I started looking at diets and arachidonic acid, it was very clear. The bulk of it came from turkey, chicken, and eggs. That's where preformed arachidonic acid comes from, and that's where a lot of the inflammation that may occur in your joints comes from as well. So might be a good thing to avoid. Now, I know these are very popular foods, they're cheap, they're subsidized and all that, but you might consider at least a trial of taking these 3 out of your diet for perhaps a period of time, maybe even just a month, without these 3 things, and see if your joints experience less inflammation, which would be predicted by the science, but of course we're all a little different. Now, if you didn't get any relief after a month, you could breathe a sigh of relief and go to Uncle Chicken in a bucket again. But chances are pretty good that it would help. So I wanted to tell you about that. Now, there are also plant-based omega-3s, and they're the ones that create leukotrienes that quench inflammation. And the best sources really are walnuts and flaxseed powder. There aren't a lot of these. Alpha-linolenic acid is the name of the omega-3 from plants. There's not a lot of them from various foods. Now, our diet daily should have about 2 to 3 grams of alpha-linolenic acid, but normally when I analyze diets, as I'll show you, there's very little in there. So I did mention that 70% of inflammatory arachidonic acid comes from meat, poultry, and game meats. And sorry about that for the paleo guys who really insist that game meats are so healthy, but they also have a lot of arachidonic acid, so that's a downside. And this study in lipids from 2003 is where I got that information, among many other studies, of course. Now, this chart, you don't have to read the whole thing, but I do want to show you that in order to make your own anti-inflammatory EPA, now EPA is eicosapentaenoic acid, a big word. But icosa just means 20 because it's 20 carbons long. And penta means 5 because it has 5 double bonds. Remember, arachidonic acid, also 20 carbons long, has 4. But this one's an omega-3 and it quenches inflammation, whereas arachidonic acid's an omega-6 and it creates more inflammation. So in order to make our own EPA in our own bodies, we do need, first of all, to get enough of the omega-3 plant-based alpha-linolenic acid, abbreviated here ALA. And we also need to get not too much of the linoleic acid. If you were to avoid bottled oils and salad dressings made from bottled oils, you would probably get dramatically less of these omega-6s in your diet. So as you can see, there are many different nutrients that can assist or slow the production of EPA in your body, and yet all of us sitting here are getting most of our EPA from our own internal production, just like cholesterol. And if you eat fatty fish, you may also get some from the fatty fish, but we do make it in our bodies. There's little doubt about that. This is a chart I made up looking at some of the different popular diets, the Mediterranean diet or the Atkins diet and so on. And the chart highlighted in yellow says ratio LA to ALA. Now, the perfect balance would be 3 to 1. From my research, that seems to be the optimize our ability to make our own EPA in the body. It's not 1 to 1 like you think it would be, or more, but that's the right one. But if you look at these diets, they're 9 to 1, 18 to 1, 10 to 1, 36 to 1, 21 to 1. In other words, they're too high. People are getting too much of the omega-6 and too little of the omega-3. So I added 2 tablespoons of ground up flax seeds to each of these diets and then reanalyzed them. And on the right-hand column, you'll see all of them came into a balance much, much better. Not only did the balance come out 2.9, 3.7, 3.4, all of them were very close to the 3 to 1, and 5 to 1 is not a terrible thing. But also, this is going to supply you with the ALA you need to make these anti-inflammatory substances in your body. Among the plants that have them, flax has the most. Canola oil has some. Again, I don't recommend bottled oils, but soybean oil has a ratio of 8 to 1, which is one of the better. Some of these, like 144 to 1 for cottonseed oil, would be a really good idea to avoid basically all refined oils and just stick with a few nuts and seeds and some flaxseed powder. What about fish oil? Now, how many people in this room do not take fish oil? Okay, that's good. It looks like we've got more than half of the people in the room not taking fish oil. You know, fish oil is one of the top 5 selling supplements in America. Can we just take fish oil to reduce inflammation? Well, in a sense, yes, because the EPA in fish oil is very powerfully anti-inflammatory. But, you know, if we just quit taking so much of the omega-6 plant-based linoleic acid, say from bottled oils, we would need 10 times less of the ALA, the omega-3 to begin with. So that would be a big help. And there might just be a little problem with fish oil. First of all, it's commonly contaminated with polychlorinated biphenyls. And DDT. These are persistent organic pollutants that cause cancer and other things. They are definitely to be avoided, but fish oil seems to concentrate them more than any other food. I'll show you a graph in the next slide. Fish oil can be contaminated with mercury, and it's commonly contaminated with dioxins. Dioxins are extremely potent and very bad chemicals, cause all kinds of terrible illness and birth defects too. Fish oil is, coincidentally and paradoxically, also high in arachidonic acid. So while fish oil has some fish oil, like salmon, mackerel, and sardines, have a lot of EPA, other fish like tuna, they don't have much anyway. But these fish have a lot of EPA, but they also have a lot of preformed arachidonic acid. So it's a mixed bag how much anti-inflammatory effect they'll really have. And then fish oil is commonly rancid. A recent study, they took fish oils from the manufacturers, fresh, in South Africa. And they took quite a collection of them, and they analyzed them for oxidation products. Lipids oxidize into very nasty substances that can raise the risk of cancer, for instance, quite a bit. And they found that 91% of the fish oil capsules were highly oxidized. So your chances of getting a fish oil capsule that's not oxidized are extremely small. And this, of course, is the nature of docosahexaenoic acid, which has 6 double bonds, and EPA, which has 5 double bonds. They're very fragile. And during the processing, grinding, heating, and storage, and so forth, they tend to go rancid quite easily. So this would be a good reason to, if you can, make them inside your bodies instead of taking them from fish. We can eat the plant-based omega-3s, limit the omega-6s, and make just the right amount of arachidonic and EPA in our own bodies. This, I think, is very important in reducing inflammation with osteoarthritis. Okay, it's time to look at antioxidants. This guy's crawling across a desert, but instead of calling for water, he's calling for antioxidant. There's a good study I found in arthritis and rheumatism that looked at vitamin C, and they found that it cut the risk of cartilage loss in arthritis down to 1/3. Now, cartilage loss is exactly what we would all like to avoid raising our risk of arthritis. I mean, basically, that's what osteoarthritis is. Cartilage gets brittle and gets broken and wears away. Making it less brittle and having less loss of cartilage is just the perfect thing. And vitamin C is very helpful in that. It knocked the risk down, like I say, to about 1/3. Beta carotene, and in fact all of the carotenoids, reduce the risk of osteoarthritis below 1/2. And vitamin E cut it down by 1/4 too. So these 3 have something in common. They're all antioxidants. Vitamin C comes from fruits and vegetables, beta carotene from fruits and vegetables, and vitamin E from nuts and seeds. So I would encourage you to eat as much as possible of your diet of fruits, vegetables, and a little nuts and seeds. Here's a study from the Indian Journal of Science from 2007, and they looked at the status of glutathione and vitamin C and vitamin E inside the joints What they found is that we need more antioxidants to have less inflammation. And even more important, these antioxidants will reduce the damage from the free radicals that cause the actual destruction of the joints. Inflammation may be mediated by leukotrienes and cytokines like interleukin and tumor necrosis factor, but these create free radicals which damage our cartilage. But the free radicals are quenched by these antioxidants. So it's a good idea to get as many antioxidants as you can. As they said, they prevent the oxidative damage and deterioration of the cartilage. Just what we'd like to see happen. Now, here's a study. Patients with knee arthritis, they took the synovial fluid and they looked at the antioxidants in the synovial fluid of the knee. And they found that when antioxidants were low, the synovial fluid was not as good a lubricator. Well, if you wanted to wear out your knees, then having a poor synovial fluid would be the way to do it. But we want good synovial fluid, so we're going to need to keep them packed with antioxidants. Easy to find in plant foods. This was a very interesting study. They did surgery on arthritic knees and also injured knees. And they looked at the difference in the amount of vitamin E in the joints. Now, injured knees were healthy knees, usually from athletes, that had 2.51 in this numbering range of vitamin E, but the osteoarthritis joints tended to have only 0.69. Now, this indicates that there's a lack of vitamin E in osteoarthritis. By increasing our vitamin E, then we can reduce our chances of arthritis. Now, what about vitamin E in food? Well, sunflower seeds are loaded with vitamin E. They're cheap, really good source of a lot of great nutrients. When I wrote this book, Vitamins and Minerals Demystified, for McGraw-Hill in 2008, it's undergraduate college textbooks on vitamins and minerals. I went through each of the vitamins and nutritional minerals, and the winner was spinach and dark green leafies for having the most micronutrients, but second place was sunflower seeds. Seeds have a tremendous amount of really wonderful nutrition in them. You can get vitamin E from butter. If you wanted to eat, say, 30 servings of butter a day, you'd get your minimum of vitamin E. But that's, of course, not practical. Cheddar cheese, yogurt, T-bone steaks, broiled chicken, and salmon all have no vitamin E. That's a shame because we need vitamin E, but other animals like salmon don't need it. After all, oxidation is rare in the dark, under cold water with no oxygen. But for humans, we really do need it. Here's some vitamin E supplements that I favor. Do you see the ones that look like almonds? They are almonds, and they're a wonderful vitamin E supplement. Sunflower seeds have even more for just a little handful of vitamin E, and hazelnuts. Now, walnuts are interesting because everyone just measures alpha tocopherol, but vitamin E is a family of tocopherols, alpha, beta, delta, and gamma. And when I rewrote my nutrition analysis program called the Diet Doctors, I changed it to read the sum of alpha, beta, delta, and gamma because they're all antioxidants instead of just alpha tocopherol. And what happened was walnuts went from 0.7 to 22.5 in their milligram content of vitamin E. So all of a sudden I'm realizing walnuts are also a good source of both ALA and vitamin E. Okay, let's talk for a minute about inflammation. This is fun. There's something called quercetin, and quercetin reduces phospholipase. Now, here's how it works. Remember that arachidonic acid and the EPA? They are stored in our cell membranes. All of our cells have membranes loaded with phospholipids, and each phospholipid has 2 fatty acids on it, and one might be arachidonic acid, or one might be EPA, or they could be trans fats or sat fats or any other kind of fatty acid. If they happen to be more filled with arachidonic acid, when this phospholipase comes along, it's going to take out arachidonic acid. Well, one way to interrupt the production of inflammatory leukotrienes is to interrupt this phospholipase, and quercetin does that. I found a fascinating study from the Yonsei Medical Journal from 2005, really worth reading, molecular targets of dietary polyphenols and anti-inflammatory properties. Onions, grapes, apples, berries, and beans, all excellent foods for so many other reasons, are excellent sources of this quercetin, which will help reduce inflammation in your body, and not just by reducing phospholipase, but other ways too. Some of them have vitamin C, and some have beta-carotene and other carotenoids, so there are many ways that they do this. There's another substance called genistein. Genistein is most famous for its content in soybeans, but it's also found in alfalfa sprouts, chickpeas, many other beans, and even peanuts. Genistein quenches inflammation and LOX. Do you remember LOX? I talked about that. That's lipoxygenase. That's the mediator that takes arachidonic acid and makes it into a very inflammatory product called leukotrienes. Now, inflammation can also be reduced by turmeric, galangal, and chamomile. And this flavonoid, it's a polyphenol, subclass flavonoid called indole-3-carbinol, this quenches them. And you'll recognize some very healthy plants here: cabbage, kale, Brussels sprouts, and broccoli. So the more you can incorporate these into your diet, I think the healthier that we all will be. Now, here's something you may not have heard of. When you eat a meal rich in saturated fat, and that means animal fat, the animals, when they die, they have a lot of bacteria in them, and our meat industry goes to great efforts to kill the bacteria, and then housewives go to great efforts to kill it once again at their stoves. And it does, in fact, die. All of the bacteria is dead in the meat, hopefully, or otherwise you're in big trouble. But what's left over are endotoxins created by the bacteria, and even including some of their skeletals. And these endotoxins, with a very rich diet of saturated fat, which is exactly what you get with most animal products, are absorbed into the bloodstream. And within 2 hours, there are much more inflammatory mediators in the bloodstream. More inflammation in the blood, more inflammation in the joints, and that's just for breakfast. Then at lunch, 2 hours later, more. So many Americans eating 3 times a day fatty animal products are actually getting a boost of inflammation in their bodies all the time. Now, this by itself might be a good reason to go ahead and go vegan and eat just a plant-based diet. There might be a few other reasons too. Okay, look at these foods. We're going to switch to advanced glycation end products. It's a browning problem. When you brown meats, barbecued, broiled, or fried, then they can create these advanced glycation end products. You can't create them with something like barbecuing tofu because the water content interrupts the final step in making an advanced glycation end product really an end product. Because these end products are plasticized proteins that are cross-linked and your body can't get rid of them. So they lodge. They lodge in our wrinkles and create more cross-linked collagen in our faces. They also lodge in our brains, and they've been shown to lodge in the amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's disease and creating a cascade of free radical and inflammatory damage. They also are found, guess where? In joints, and that's why I'm bringing them up tonight. They're well known to trigger free radicals. In fact, one estimate says that these proteins can trigger 50 times as many free radicals as an ordinary protein. So this study from Arthritis and Rheumatism in 2005 said that AGEs can increase the progression of cartilage damage in arthritis. Well, that's something we want to avoid, so it might be a good idea to avoid them. Now, if you were to change how you prepared the meat and boil it or make a stew or a soup out of it, then you would not create advanced glycation end products. Another study from Arthritis Research and Therapy in 2004 showed that the accumulation of these AGEs was correlated with increased stiffness and brittleness of the cartilage. Think about stiff, brittle cartilage and how easy that is to break up, causing little fragments of cartilage to nest inside your joints, creating more inflammation as your immune system attacks these broken off bits of cartilage. This is something that would be perfect to avoid. How do you avoid them? Well, it's not too hard. But I did want to mention that cartilage degeneration was associated with higher AGE levels. There's 2 ways that we get AGEs into our bloodstream. One way is if you drink a giant sugary drink or get another blood sugar rush. The sugar in your bloodstream, if it's excessive, will actually glycate the proteins of your artery walls and your blood proteins. That's one way you can get AGEs in your body. Another way is by eating them. So what foods have them? Well, let's see. Going from the most to the least: chicken, bacon, beef, chicken, chicken, beef, chicken, chicken, beef, chicken, turkey. I think you get the idea. So if you're eating barbecued, broiled, or fried chicken, turkey, or beef, then you may be causing, not just with endotoxins, but now also with advanced glycation end products, problems with inflammation. I think you're all beginning to see a pattern here, and the pattern's really quite simple. I could have just said this and it would be the end of the talk. Plant foods quench inflammation. Animal foods increase inflammation. I'm giving you some specifics here, but that's really the summary of it. So let's take a quick look at synovial fluid. Synovial fluid, of course, is the grease in the joints. We want it to be just right. The British Journal of Rheumatology did a study, and they found that synovial fluid is principally made up of phosphatidylcholine and phosphatidylethanolamine, two phospholipids, and beans are an excellent source of these. You know, beans would be a wonderful thing to include in your diet for so many reasons. Satisfaction after you eat, the kind of satisfaction that many people only get with animal products like cheese or meat because they give you that fullness afterwards. Well, beans give you that fullness, but also help your synovial fluid to be more lubricating. Soybean phosphatidylcholine was therefore shown to be effective in reducing inflammatory reactions in arthritis. Now, if you look at different foods, they have different amounts of these phospholipids. For instance, soy has a very large amount of phospholipids, whereas coconut has almost no phospholipids, and canola falls somewhere in between. So most of the beans have a good amount of phospholipids, whereas most other foods don't. So a good reason to include beans in your diet. Now I want to talk a little bit about collagen. Isn't this a fascinating matrix? Lattice work up here that we can deposit a lot of calcium and phosphorus onto this and make bone, or we can deposit proteoglycans and chondrocytes in here and create cartilage. And this is what cartilage is. It's made on this matrix. Now to keep our cartilage healthy, we need to keep our collagen healthy. One of the proteoglycans, as I mentioned, is chondroitin sulfate. It's one of the most common in many animal species in the joints. And we can make that ourselves, and it gets compressed into this lattice and creates the springiness. There's actually an electrostatic repulsion, and it attracts more water and makes our cartilage springy. Now this is a very good thing because then our cartilage is less prone to damage. Vitamin C is an essential component of making collagen. We absolutely need it in two different ways to make collagen. This is a diagram from my book, Vitamins and Minerals Demystified. I have to give credit to McGraw-Hill on that one. Weak and brittle cartilage is what you get if you don't get enough vitamin C to make your collagen. It's found in fruits and vegetables. Now, iron is also needed. And it's amazing, some diets are low in iron. Diets that you wouldn't expect to be low in iron. You do need a certain amount of iron. Too much is not good, but you need a certain amount. Iron is important to help make this collagen. Copper is needed too. It helps cross-link collagen and elastin. The very name elastin makes you think of springy, elastic cartilage instead of brittle, easy-to-break cartilage. Finally, manganese is needed. It's needed by an enzyme for collagen formation. Manganese here is found in spinach. Now, if you look at two common diets I picked, the Atkins diet and the vegan diet. Vegan means a plant-based diet without animal products. Vitamin C, the RDA is 75. Those poor Atkins diet people only got 16 milligrams. But the vegan diet provided 354 in this example, which is a very abundant amount. With iron, you'd be surprised. The Atkins diet, this one I chose kindly so it would look a little better, so it didn't have so much red meat in it. It turned out not even to have the minimum amount of iron you need. But with a vegetable diet, a plant-based diet, people tend to get a good amount of iron, like 25 as compared with an RDA of 8. Copper, again, very low on an Atkins diet. Good on a plant-based diet, largely found in nuts and seeds. And then there's manganese. Manganese is very deficient on an Atkins diet or any meat-based diet, and very good for you in so many ways, but especially to make collagen, for good cartilage. Now I want to switch to a difficult-to-say term called S-adenosyl methionine, or for short, SAMe, so I don't have to keep saying that word. It's made in our bodies, and that's a real key. If we have enough folate, folate is a B vitamin. You may have heard the term folic acid, which is used for fortification and supplementation. Folate is the natural form found in plants and in people. Folate is a necessary B vitamin. If you just get the RDA of folate, you'll be able to make SAMe from homocysteine, and this is a very good thing. Also, we need vitamin B12. And of course, a sublingual vitamin B12 tablet is good insurance for both meat eaters and plant eaters alike, because it assures that the B12 is entering your bloodstream. And so many people with clinical B12 deficiency are eating plenty of B12 in their diet, but not absorbing it. I won't go into the details, but it's hard to absorb. SAMe can be taken as a supplement. It's a very popular supplement. You find it in many stores. This study was reported in the American Journal of Nutrition, and they did a 24-month multi-center open trial. They used 400 milligrams of supplementary SAMe. They showed improvement in osteoarthritis over 2 years, and it was very well tolerated. One caveat with SAMe is that it should never be taken with any psychoactive drugs, especially Prozac or any of the SSRI drugs. So if you're on any drugs, you should check with your doctor if this is going to conflict. Because if you take this SAMe and Prozac, you might wind up with too big of a smile, and we wouldn't want that. The subjects in this trial showed clinical improvements after 2 weeks and continued to improve until the end of the study, and almost 1/5 of them were then symptom-free. So here we have a case where people are actually recovering from mild osteoarthritis with the assistance of SAMe. Here's another study from Critical Reviews in Food Science and Nutrition from 2008. It's a short-term, double-blind clinical trial. They found that SAMe was equally as effective as Celebrex. Now, those of you, has anyone here ever taken Celebrex, the painkiller? It's quite powerful, isn't it? It's really a great painkiller. And they found that SAMe matched right up to it. It took a while for it to achieve the same power of pain-killing effectiveness. And I'll tell you a little more about why that is. It alleviates the inflammation in osteoarthritis, and it limits further destruction of cartilage. Now, this is different than a painkiller. Another study, this from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, excellent journal, SAMe increased the production of the proteoglycan chondroitin sulfate. And this is the best way to get more chondroitin sulfate into your cartilage. So if you're taking enough folate and B12, then you can make enough of this SAMe. The benefit there is that homocysteine, a very undesirable risk factor for heart disease and Alzheimer's disease in your blood, gets transformed with the assistance of vitamin B12 and folate into SAMe, which is tremendously useful and helpful chemical in our bodies. It's essential to keep our cartilage springy. My advice to you is try and make it yourself. There are no vegetarian or vegan forms of chondroitin sulfate. It's basically ground up cartilage, so that makes it difficult for plant eaters to eat it. But also, it would be best if you could just make it yourself. Inside our bodies, as I mentioned, enough B12 and folate, you make SAMe, and then you make chondroitin sulfate. Now, I want to mention just three actually, medicinal plants. Now, in the corner here, we see that there are 243 medical plants listed in my database of medical plants. I, for 30 years, have been categorizing plants from all over the world. I've gone to 54 countries and hundreds of books written by the very best experts in the field of medical plants, and put that into a database over 30 years. There's over 168,000 footnoted facts in there now. It's really quite large. So it's not surprising to see there's over 200 different natural remedies used for osteoarthritis. Well, I'm just going to show you 3 tonight, because we don't have that much time left. And they're not all that great. And they haven't all been studied scientifically to make sure they're really going to work. In the journal Inflammation Research from 2001, they did a 4-week double-blind placebo-controlled trial, the gold standard of testing drugs. That means it's hard to cheat on. And they evaluated cat's claw. You see that claw in the picture? That's how the plant was named. They showed that individuals in the treatment group with cat's claw had reduced pain with activity. They did not have reduced pain when they were sitting around or at night. But reduced pain with activity is a very good thing, because if you have reduced pain with activity, you're likely to be more active, thus getting more circulation to your joints, reducing pain, maybe getting some endorphins, and it's a very good thing. Cat's claw did not seem to have any bad side effects. Devil's claw is second of the three medical plants that I'll mention today, and they said that it had moderate evidence of effectiveness. And this is a meta-study of devil's claw, where they looked at several studies reported in Phytotherapy Research in 2008. They looked at all the studies that matched their standards, and they found that, yes, it's moderately effective. I saved the best till last. Boswellia was studied in phytomedicine in 2003. All patients receiving treatments reported a decrease in knee pain. These are osteoarthritis patients. They had increased ability to flex their knee and increased walking distance. This sounds very positive. The swelling in the joint was also reduced. They didn't see a change in x-rays, but typically x-ray changes of cartilage are extremely slow, so I'm not too surprised at that. Here's another study on Boswellia. Interesting, it inhibited leukotriene biosynthesis by impairing the LOX enzyme that I've been talking about. The same one that's inhibited by Celebrex with all of those side effects and the anti-inflammatory drugs, ibuprofen, with all of those side effects. But this didn't seem to have any side effects. Does anyone know the common name of Boswellia? It's one of the three plants that the wise men brought Jesus. Frankincense, yes. Another study in clinical rheumatology in 2004, they tested an herbal formula. This one had ashwagandha, boswellia, ginger, and turmeric, and pain was reduced in half compared to placebo without side effects. There are so many of these formulas on the market for arthritis. Looking around, I see a huge number. I picked one that looked non-destructive and possibly helpful and put it up for you, but there are so many others. But it's difficult to tell with sponsored research and advertisements, basically, if these are good or bad. This one seemed to have a good non-sponsored study in clinical rheumatology. Who's ever taken MSM? Okay, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say some things about it that aren't too complimentary tonight. It's claimed to be a naturally occurring compound supplying sulfur to the body. It is naturally occurring, but the amount in one dose of MSM is the amount in the bodies of 294 men. It's not naturally occurring in those quantities. And it's also found in food. Well, this is true. And if you were to drink, say, 300,000 cups of milk, you'd get the daily dose recommended on the side of an MSM bottle. So it's really not found in food to any appreciable extent, or in human bodies either. By the way, the picture here is a picture of a paper and pulp plant in Louisiana where the MSM America originates. It's a byproduct of the paper and pulp industry. They add sodium sulfite to the pulped trees, forming a black liqueur, which has a very distinctive aroma. If any of you from Oregon have ever noticed the aroma of black liqueur from a paper and pulp mill, it's pretty nasty stuff. 99.7% of the sulfur comes from the chemicals added during the processing, so it's not a natural source of sulfur by any means. Now, from this black liqueur, they make DMSO, which is absolutely the safest and best way to strip paint off of an airplane or a car. It really is. As paint strippers go, it's quite safe. But I don't think that there's been enough human research to apply DMSO to your joints, even though it does seem to kill the pain, perhaps by killing nerve endings. No one really knows because of the lack of research. But if you oxidize DMSO, you get MSM, which is a perfect example of how a health food store product can get marketed without sufficient human safety studies or even proper looking at if it's effective or not, or safe. So one more thing, avocado soy unsaponifiables. Hard to say, but this study in BMC musculoskeletal disorders from 2008 showed that it cut pain in half. It seems to be a safe, natural product made from soy and avocados, and it seemed to cut pain in half in a 6-month prospective, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. This is a very good type of protocol for a clinical trial. Now I'm just going to summarize for you what I've talked tonight. You have your handout, so that'll help you a lot too. Reduce obesity for knee and hip joints, and also wear insoles. Moderate activity is very helpful, as is physical therapy. You can decrease inflammation by decreasing the amount of liquid oils that you eat that are omega-6, by avoiding turkey, chicken, and eggs because they contain this preformed omega-6 called arachidonic acid. Also, it would be very helpful if we all got enough of alpha-linolenic acid, and the only way to do that, the omega-3 from plants, is either to eat walnuts or flaxseed powder, the only practical way. You want to boost your antioxidant intake, which means more fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds. Avoiding advanced glycation end products in food might be a challenge for those people who like to barbecue, but I challenge you to do that. It'll be good for your health in so many ways, and you'll also be avoiding heterocyclic amines and some other undesirable components of barbecued meat. Soy foods are helpful in lubricating joints, and you can help build your collagen by getting good nutrients, just your basic vitamin C, iron, manganese, and copper. You might consider, if you have already osteoarthritis and you're not just hoping not to have it, consider SAM-E as a supplement, or avocado soy unsaponifiables, and possibly glucosamine sulfate. Although it's controversial, there is no downside except for some cost, and the upside is it might supply some raw materials to help your joints. And then finally, cat's claw, devil's claw, and most of all, boswellia have been shown in some studies to be helpful, and again, without any downside at all except for a moderate cost. So I want to thank you all very much, and I'm going to open it up to questions in just a minute. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, our first question is from this nice lady over here. So you're saying, well, you know, you can find vegetarian and vegan glucosamine. So you might as well do that because it's likely to be less polluted with other things anyway. SAM-E and glucosamine are different things for different things. Glucosamine is really a raw material to help you create your cartilage, and SAM-E is something quite else. I think I've explained that you want to get enough folate and vitamin B12 so that you can make your own SAM-E and also reduce your blood homocysteine levels. And that would be good. If you do have arthritis and you want to experiment with SAM-E, try and find some without MSM, I hope. That would be good. Thank you for your question. Okay, it was a double question. One was the role of psychological stress in arthritis. I'm sorry, I'm not qualified to answer that question. I would love to look into it, but not really my specialty. The second one was on the role of nightshade plants. That would be eggplant, tomato, potatoes, and these are all part of the nightshade family. Some people are sensitive to these and some are not. So you just have to see. If you're sensitive to those plants and they cause joint pain, well, that would be a great reason not to eat them. On the other hand, if you're not sensitive to them, tomatoes have lycopene and lots of vitamin C and carotenoids. Good reasons to eat these things if you're not sensitive to them. So I'll have to answer yes and no. Thank you very much. The question is, soy food, I'm saying, has phosphatidylcholine in it, and phosphatidylcholine is very good for making synovial fluid and lubricate your joints and protect your cartilage. And yet there's been some propaganda in the news lately that soy foods can be dangerous. I would like to reassure you that I have looked carefully through the studies and found exactly the opposite. The phytoestrogens that are found in these plants are 1,000 times less powerful than real estrogen or estradiol, which would be a problem. And they lock onto the same receptors, thus bumping aside the true estrogen and thus reducing your chances of breast cancer. In fact, a recent study came out showing that women who had breast cancer, they looked at recurrence after the operation, and they found that the women who ate soy had much less recurrence of breast cancer than the women who didn't eat soy. I apologize to newscasters saying that soy food is not healthful. It would be nice if the soy was organically grown, so that would be of benefit, I think, for that one. Thank you for your question. Yes, the question is, meat is bad, vegetables are good, what about fish? I know that there is a continuing note of approval of fish from doctors and news stories and novels and all where we get our information. And yet, I can't find anything in fish that is really necessary. Now, there are a couple of things in fish that might be useful, such as EPA and DHA. I think we can make EPA. Whether we can make our own DHA or not is still not completely settled. This is something that Dr. Bill Harris and I and many of our colleagues are digging into to try and find out if we really need it. If we do need DHA, though, I, for one, would certainly want to take the algal form of DHA. Otherwise, I would have to say that fish is not healthful to eat. And I know that I'm going to be contradicting a lot of other health authorities in saying that. And yet, the concentration of persistent organic pollutants is really high in fish. As I showed you with the chart, it's higher than anything else in so many of these things. And of course, fish doesn't have any fiber. Fish doesn't have any antioxidants. Fish doesn't have any essential fatty acids. And fish doesn't have any vitamin C. There's a lot of things that are missing in fish. So this is not probably my choice of an oil. On the other hand, coconut oil is excellent for external use, very good for the skin. So I'd say rub it on your body, try not to get it in your mouth. Thanks for your question. Thank you.